All right, we're live again. Hello and welcome back to the Iron Mountain Hour. We just finished doing episode 23 live, but apparently YouTube had some real issues with the streaming and buffering, and it cut out large sections of the interview or the
Cut off
episode.
about 20 minutes at the beginning.
I think we probably lost quite a bit at the beginning, and then we lost a good 20 minutes at the end. All the stuff we talked about is the local stuff. So real quick, just to breeze over what we got into. If you before we do that, if you wouldn't care to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you catch us every time we go live. That's Sunday nights at 10 o'clock. We were there. YouTube didn't let us down a little bit, but that's all right. We did
Well,
be
do you
there.
want to, since all that local news stuff just got brushed over, you want to give it a real quick gloss over
That's
it?
what I figured. We'd talk really quick about the nuclear. At least since we mentioned it in the title of episode 23, that we would at least go over the story about the TVA, the nuclear program, and as we got into on previous episode, TVA is a private entity that is owned by the federal government, and TVA sponsored a pilot program to fund smart poles in Johnson City, which is part of the whole smart electric infrastructure. And we read a little bit about that. So or we talked about that in an earlier episode. But in this episode, we got into the TVA and their pilot program to start a series of modular nuclear reactors to supplement the electricity and replace a lot of the fossil fuels going forward. And I talked to my brother he's in the nuclear industry. He's actually a nuclear engineer, and he feels like this is the wave of the future.
Is
And we
for
as
small nuclear
small
reactors.
modular nuclear reactors, yes. And in this TVA program, here we look at a story from the Associated Press. If I can, oh shoot, let me get on the right scene here to pull this up. We look at a story from the Associated Press, and maybe we do. Having all kinds of issues here tonight. Let's turn this off, back on, and turn this on. And there we are. Okay, so let's check this article out. This is from the Journal Record, but I read this in the Johnson City Press, the AP article.
I don't think it's showing it. I think it's just showing a black screen on
There
this
we go.
channel.
I've got it now. So
There you go.
the largest public power company in the U.S. is launching a program to develop and fund new small modular nuclear reactors as part of its strategy to dramatically reduce greenhouse gases. They're going to spend $200 million into. They're trying to get this approved to try modular nuclear reactors in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, at the Clinch River Valley nuclear site. And by 2050, they're hoping to hit a net zero carbon emission. So they're trying to build a series of these to replace a lot of the fossil fuel plants that we use, whether it be coal or oil or natural gas, whatever it may be. They want to use it in concert with the solar and wind where they're applicable, and the hydroelectric dams that we already have. The TVA actually provides power to 7 states in the southeast.
That's
And
it.
yeah, but
Seems
as
like
it
it'd be
says,
more, doesn't it?
yeah, it kind of does, but it is the largest public utility. Um, so as I said, I read this in the Johnson City Press, and in I think it was the same article, and it may have been, or the same paper, and it may have been a day or two before. There was an article from Press does an interesting feature in every, and I think it's every paper, where they look at Johnson City history from on this day or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a story back from the late 1800s about the water company in Johnson City was threatening to turn off the water and turn off the fire hydrants because they had installed 53 fire hydrants, and the city only wanted to pay them $1,600 versus the $1,800 that they said they were owed. So the water company was cutting off the water to the citizens' fire hydrants and homes until they paid the rest of it. So I thought that was an interesting story. Speaking of public utilities, but the the idea of replacing fossil fuels we looked at um, as part of, well, I guess you could say the smart city agenda that we saw, where they're looking to regulate basically the amount of all the energy that everybody's using, and know who's using what and where, and being able to basically digitally cut it off instead of having an analog flow of electricity where like, all this energy is going out in every direction all the time. Basically, they want to be able to control the individual points of distribution of the electricity and make it more efficient, is what they say. But I also feel like there's got to be a control element to that too. And but then again, if that is the case, I think nuclear power, being the amount of power that it produces and as efficient as it is, would be a net benefit to individuals, basically, and smaller people, because that would seem to provide a lot more low cost energy, and be able to move towards if we are moving towards this green agenda with renewable and other sources with less carbon output. Nuclear seems like a way that we would not have to sacrifice our way of lives and being able to use electricity in order to achieve that. So I'm not sure how I feel on it yet, but
the same idea that when you say, like you said, it was just smaller nuclear reactors instead of gigantic ones that like for example the Fukushima one was giant, right?
yeah,
That was a big one, and then Three Mile Island was a big one, and then I imagine Chernobyl was a big one. I've never actually seen the picture of it or remember. So isn't that sort of like the same idea of like 5G? I'm not trying to get on like
I don't know
a
what you
weird.
mean.
Okay, 4G was what the way 4G towers work is you have high signal output towers, but fewer of them. And the idea of 5G is we're just going to have shortwave, super powered ones,
fast,
but a lot
really
more of
short, yeah.
them. And if we're going to put tiny nuclear reactors in every bigger city, um, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to get is like if a Chernobyl or a 3 Mile Island goes awry, how bad is it versus a tiny one in Oak Ridge?
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I did ask my brother, because I remember there was a 2020 and a Dateline and different investigative news programs in the early 2000s, and they did several episodes or several specials on the Yucca Mountain Storage Facility out there near Arizona, and how basically the way of disposing of this nuclear waste from weapons making, from energy, from leftover from old plants, that it was the inadequate storage containers, and it was seeping into the mountain, and that this waste would be with us for thousands or millions of years or whatever it was. But I did talk to my brother about this, and he said that the storage has greatly improved since the time of those stories, and it's a lot safer now. He did tell me that they at Duke Energy store all their waste on site there, but he seems to believe,
What is the waste?
well, with the spent fuel rods.
Okay, so the waste is actually 'cause you got the big rod, wah, 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 glowing nuclear things. They keep submerged because if you don't keep them submerged, it's bad. Like those eventually burn out. Is that what it is?
Yeah, but they still off put. Like, okay, so as we talked about earlier on the stream, that we did earlier tonight, that YouTube cut off part of it due to whatever technical issues they were having. The nuclear plant, as Tim mentioned, it operates like a modern steam plant, because you're using these fuel rods that are they're shedding lots and lots of energy
I wonder if that
to heat
which
water.
we can keep going because this is new information. I wonder if it doesn't show it because it's still streaming where it was so far behind lagging.
That's a possibility. But when we put up the stream earlier tonight, we did an hour and 35-minute episode, or hour and 42-minute episode. We only pulled up when we looked at our YouTube. It only actually pulled up. It says 1:15, but then when you click on it, it only has a minute and two, and it basically
Still two numbers are off then because we went for over an hour and a half. And
yeah.
Okay.
And then it basically stopped right when we were finishing up the
To talk about the local stuff.
yeah, when we finished up the Illuminati symbolism and the Masonic symbolism, and we were kind of getting into the history of the Masons, which really sucks because I felt like I gave a pretty concise explanation on.
Oh yeah, but
on,
plus it cut off some of the Super Bowl stuff too that we started getting into.
Yeah, so
Did you
if you missed that, I hate that you missed it, and I just wanted to kind of go over a little bit of the local angle before we call it a night.
Have you ever seen the videos of when nuclear power was coming out? I'm sorry, I hang out in some really stupid areas. Maybe I'm wrong though. Maybe this isn't stupid. There was a guy who was going around. I'm wanting to say 50s or 60s, judging by the way the film looked, trying to show American people that radiation was a hoax. Have you seen those
I've
videos
seen
where he
some of
would
those.
go
Yeah.
and for anybody who wants to look it up, it's a guy who was going around
You talking
saying
about the
that
guy that ate the plutonium?
he would eat he would literally eat nuclear waste.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, "This is registered as waste," and he would eat it right in front of the reporters, and then he would walk into the reactor with a bathrobe, and then he would go swimming in the reactor
Yeah,
water.
yeah.
And
But evidently he did not die from
he
it.
didn't die.
The spent fuel rods, even after they are not hot enough to, to still power the turbines, they're still off-putting electrons, and
Mm-hmm.
they're still radiating, so they have to be disposed of carefully, and so that is a concern that people have, and then you have of course, the famous meltdowns that you mentioned earlier in some of those other nuclear reactors. Um, People have that concern, but evidently, even including the meltdowns and those famous nuclear disasters, the impact of nuclear accidents has been far less than other forms of energy. So,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you look at something like the Deepwater Horizon and the Exxon Valdez spills and all these big old oil spills, um, I I don't know how bad those affect the environment long term.
The oil spills
Um,
couldn't have been good at all.
well,
I guess like it's more visual. Like you can see ducts being cleaned with Dawn dish detergent and stuff like that. Which my conspiracy brain was, Dawn, you made that Exxon Valdez oil spill happen on purpose so you could sell dish detergent.
boy, they did though, didn't they? They
Hey
sell
man,
some
that was good
distributed.
marketing.
But there's some there's some evidence also that they pull this oil out of the ocean, out from beneath the seafloor. Sometimes this oil escapes naturally into the ocean, and the ocean has a way of the bacteria in there
Well, isn't that kind of
eat the
weird?
oil up and
Well,
stuff.
I could see how all that oil coming up would definitely be bad, right? That's you don't want too much of anything will ruin the atmosphere
Yeah.
or environment, right? But why is the oil black when they're pulling it off the ducts? Like oil doesn't come out of the ground like looking the way we think spent. Like when you pull your
Well,
oil
when
out of a car, the reason it's black is because it's burnt and
Well, that's
used.
yeah, that's the crude oil is a totally different beast. But but I'm not sure that was crude that the Valdez was carrying when you saw all those the images and the
I guess
videos
yeah,
of them.
I guess I'm forgetting that a lot of
It
that oil and stuff is used to make plastics and stuff too. It's not just gasoline.
Yeah, it has a lot of. I mean, it's a really important thing for way many other operations than fuel.
Well, did you
Y-
see? I don't know if this could be conspiracy. Maybe it's just the way the natural free market system works. Have you ever seen the thing where that like all that gasoline and kerosene stuff was just a byproduct of what they were using for oil for anyway, and they needed to find a way to use it,
oh, and
and so that's the
they
reason they
found, hey, we can
ran the
burn it.
alcohol engine out and the electric engine. It was the electric engine, the alcohol engine were in competition with the gasoline powered combustion engine. And essentially, they needed something to do with all this shit that was coming out of this crude oil that they were making, and they figured out they could burn it, and that's the reason we have gasoline-powered cars to begin with. Because if we don't burn gasoline, all this stuff like this, we can't have this because this is made out of petroleum too. Well, actually, these
That's
are
right.
wood. I take that back.
Well, but a lot of things are made out of petroleum. Most of the plastics that we see are, or many of them.
Well,
Um,
microphone. There you go.
Yep, there's a lot of petroleum right here. But yeah, the idea is let's use these small nuclear reactors, see right now the TVA operates three nuclear power plants, which is the third largest nuclear fleet in the nation. Which these three plants, they actually supply more than 40% of the electricity for the 7 states. So just those three nuclear reactors, you think about all the dams that they operate, coal plants, natural gas plants, and those three reactors make 40% of the electricity for the TVA. So that just shows you kind of how efficient or
How
how
many
powerful
dams? Like
nuclear
I know
is.
we've got Wilbur, right?
Yeah,
Well, I guess it's the Earth Dam, and then you've got Little Wilbur.
I think Wilbur's where they make the electricity.
So is that just us? Because I know the
I
Holston
really
Dam.
don't. I'm really not informed about where that electricity actually goes
Because
and
isn't
where.
the Holston awful close when you start thinking of proximity of dams?
Yeah,
Because I know
good question. Yeah.
Holston's damn creepy when you start like. Because I always forget how big that sucker is until you start driving up and you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, oh,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah. If you've never walked across or South Holston Dam, you ought to go do it. It's pretty cool actually, and
Yeah.
you see exactly how big it is
I
in
guess in
like 10 minutes.
comparison, because I was used to Little Earth, I'm used to our Little Wilbur and stuff
Yeah,
like that, and because Wilbur broke at one point and it F things up pretty bad. But like I can only imagine if the Holston broke. Good lord.
but Yeah, that's the question. Is nuclear the future for Tennessee? We're going to find out soon because the TVA's meeting and they're trying to get this approved and they are wanting to try it out. So I guess we'll see. The jury's out right now as far as I'm concerned. I don't know enough about nuclear power to know if this is a great thing
Yeah.
or if this is, I mean, on the surface level, it seems kind of good as far as having efficient power and low cost energy so that we can, I mean, whether or not, I mean, whether or not lowering our carbon will actually affect anything as far as the planet warming, who
Hmm.
knows? I mean, even the proponents of these ideas that we should basically stop using all carbon immediately and end oil and gas production and go straight to wind and solar power exclusively. Even those folks say that doing that is only going to possibly stop the rise of the temperature by zero point 0.1 degrees over a course of 100 years.
Hmm.
Or I think it was zero point 0.1 degrees Celsius. So, um,
I can't do the conversion in
yeah,
my
that's,
head.
that's still not very
Be able
much.
to if I could.
And if even if we were able to achieve that, I don't think that small amount is going to stop glaciers from melting if that's what's going to happen. But there's a lot of evidence that we are actually at a low point as far as carbon. And well, I mean, it's not a lot of evidence. It's scientific fact as far as we go back to the ice cores from millions of years ago when we had more life as far as more diverse life on the planet, more diversity of species. We also had larger species when we had more carbon. So carbon dioxide is definitely necessary for life.
From the heat though.
It could be that we didn't have the same kind of heat that we do now that we did back then, even with all the carbon, even though we did have, well, no, back then, I guess if you go far enough back,
I'm saying like if you keep
yeah,
rewinding it,
yeah, yeah, we did have a lot more heat then.
because
Um,
that broadcast or video I watched by Elon Musk, 'cause I have no idea if the video cut that part off or not. He explains that where most of the fuel actually comes from are the little cells that like algae like bacteria that were on top of all the ponds,
mhm.
and they absorb millions of years of sunlight.
You're talking about fossil fuel.
Yeah, and does that not make not I'm sorry, can a bacteria absorb sunlight
Well,
and then hold on to that sunlight for 2 million years or
I
65
don't
million
really
years?
know as far as if you have photosynthesis and you're creating energy and then you are trapped in. I mean, that energy is still created. I don't know what happens to it, but I think it's a lot more than that too. I think it's like,
It seems like a very reduced way of putting it. Like,
well, I guess it's all
that it's
the.
all bacteria.
I don't think it's all that. I think it's like it's supposed to be all the carbon, all the carbon life forms together, like as they mash down, and make layers of grass and trees and
Yeah.
animals and swamps and algae and bacteria, and it's a little bit of everything. And I've seen also theories that the Earth actually replenishes.
Man, I know that sounds
Uh,
like crazy, and I'm willing to take on like the moniker of being the guy who believes something really crazy, or I'll say entertained a crazy belief for
yeah.
a minute. It doesn't seem like there's enough like the way the world is continually eating itself.
Hmm.
It doesn't seem like we could lose any of that material. It, does it not make more sense that oil is like a byproduct of all that burning constant? Like if it's just
Maybe.
nonstop heat and shit down there, like isn't there enough stuff to keep pushing out?
Maybe.
Oh,
I mean, well, they found so much oil over the last several years. You used to have that worry of peak
we're gonna
oil.
run out, yeah.
That was a
Which
conspiracy theory from the I think it was from the 1990s, early 90s, that we've reached a certain level of oil, and that from here on out there's not going to be enough oil to sustain our level of life, so the whole society's going to crash. And
hmm.
of course, that didn't end up happening the way that they said. But not only that, we actually discovered giant reservoirs of oil, way more than we ever thought. Actually, the one they found up there in Alaska, I think it was the Anwar province. They say it's at Earth's current levels of consumption of oil, there's enough to sustain for 1,000 years up there in Alaska, and that was just one of several large. Of course, it's a federally protective
Hmm.
land up there, so there's no drilling allowed. But there were several other ones found. There were in places like Texas and South Dakota, and we're actually sitting on way more oil than we actually ever realized. So at least until we get these other technologies ready, we do have abundant sources of oil as long as the government allows us to get access to them. And I'm not necessarily, um, you know, I don't necessarily think that that 100% that the ANWR should be drilled. I mean, I don't know. Don't want to affect the wildlife area up there, but at the same time, that's part of why the United States has Alaska is for its mineral resources.
I thought it was to keep Russia at bay.
Well, yeah, well, that's part of it, yeah. But one of the main reasons is there are a lot of mineral resources and a lot of other things, strategic resources that we could use. I definitely would want to try to protect the environment up there while we do those. But in any case, we need electricity at reasonable costs until we find a way to do it that doesn't have the kind of pollution that is associated with
Man, like
oil power.
we talked about how the nuclear fuel is essentially steam power, or like super
Yeah.
steam power, right?
There is super steam that would cut you in half on those.
But isn't like aren't you creating heat? Like I know maybe that's not the same thing as pushing carbon up into the air or whatever, but aren't you if you build like a bunch of tiny nuclear reactors, which are if you picture it tonotopically, now in every city just has this giant cauldron sitting in it, isn't that going to raise the temperature of the earth if every major city has its own cauldron now?
Well, good question. I mean, they do when they have these reactors, they flow water in to keep them cool, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
But like the one in Duke, for example, they have Duke Energy. They have a lake there, and they carefully monitor the temperature of the lake and release and rotate the water so that it doesn't really raise the temperature of it. So they,
But this is all going up in the air too.
but to a degree,
I mean?
yeah.
Like-
Oh yeah, to a degree, yeah.
You're still putting that temperature out there. And man, I wonder like do you know how air conditioning works? I know it's sounds like a crazy question.
No, yeah, I do. It's as far as it pulls the
It pulls the heat out of the air, right? And then like call me crazy, but like instead of doing all this carbon emission stuff, doesn't it seem like it'd be easier just to start gathering that crap out of the air? Like we've got air filters. Is that not
well,
the
I mean,
thing?
they do have. I mean, smokestacks have to have filters and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it does seem like that would make sense to do
Well, I know
more of
you
that.
can't like that. I'm just saying, like, if they're saying that there's carbon in the air rather than us deciding that maybe we should let a bunch of idiots black the sky out. 'Cause I know
Yeah.
you saw that article. Let's dim the sun. That doesn't sound like the
Yeah.
intro to a horror movie
Well,
at all.
that's yet another thing we see from one of our favorite people there, Bill Gates. He's talked about that before. Dimming the sun down. We do want to get into where's the one real quick that we looked at the Eastman steam line failure. Um,
Oh, is that what happened over at the explosion? Was a steam line failure?
Yeah, it was a steam line failure. They were careful not to call it explosion. It was a rupture of the steam line. Um, and okay.
Well, if it's steam, I guess they wouldn't want to use that because the word explosion implies combustibles, right?
Yes, it does. But I mean, if you have pressure on a steam valve and you pop a hole in it, it's still going to be destructive. And
Well, you're still going to have that. I
it's
guess
still
that
going to be
combust.
it's still going to be
It's not going to
explosion.
be.
It's not going to be combustion, but there's still going to be a pressure explosion or pressure release out of rupture
Yeah.
somewhere. It's coming out somewhere it's not supposed to.
I don't know. I guess maybe they're just using tricky talking.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. They're copolyester acetate and tow business. That's acetate tow business. That's where they're hardest hit by Eastman is over there. Their story was that basically it blew asbestos everywhere, and so people were saying they're like, don't be picking up this debris out of your yard and stuff like this if you found this in your yard. Says roughly 500 properties were cleaned so far. Rain's not a concern. It caused debris, some of which contains asbestos, to fly into nearby neighborhoods. And Eastman says, don't pick up the debris; it may contain asbestos. So they have crews that have visited around 500 properties, and they're cleaning these things up. So investigation into the steam line failure could take weeks. So they don't know exactly what's happening yet, or at least Eastman is, if they have figured out, they're not releasing it just yet. But I guess we'll keep watching that moving forward and let you know if anything new occurs in that. This we got from 3 days ago. Again, so many things happen in the time between these episodes that a lot of times we don't get to hit all of it. But 5 were injured after the steam line failure, um, and it released 300,000 gallons of wastewater into the river on January 31st, and this it was released at 20,000 gallons per minute. Let's see,
20,000
that's a lot of damn
quite a
water.
bit.
But we don't really have any new news as far as it says there's no detrimental effects to fish or aquatic life were observed, and no known health risks are known to be associated with the release.
So-called big sluice on the river. What does that mean?
I don't know.
It's the second one where 2 employees.
The second event involved people just noting a sheen at the company's so-called big sluice. So I guess they must have noticed something across the top of the water there from the wastewater plant. And then a final notification came about 3:25 and reported a sheen on the river coming from
sheen on the river.
Yes, from their Eastman's industrial sewer system, and the material released was a hydraulic oil about 40 pounds, which resulted in a visible sheen. So they don't know exactly when it doesn't detail when the discharge began, but the suspected cause is the inability of chill water units in the company's building 102 to shut off. So overflow entered the industrial sewer system basement and subsequently the river 4 days later. So they got the emails here on WJHL.com. They've done pretty good on this. They've kept up pretty good. If you go over up here on the top, if you go to news and click on that tab, and you can open right there to the steam line failure, and it'll give you everything happening on there. So I think that's about it for tonight. We're done another about 25 minutes here. My name's Cliff, and this is Tim.
My name is David.
This is David. But anyway, we thank you for joining us, and sorry about the video getting cut off earlier. And I hope you find this interesting. If you're from our local area, then you probably will. If you're not from our local area, then you'll probably just kind of move on. But either way, we're glad to have you with us, and we hope you'll subscribe and like and share this with your friends. Get other people to come on the channel. We're up to 76 subscribers now, so we're building the channel, but we want to keep it going. So we'd appreciate it if you come back and join us again. We're over here every Sunday at 10 o'clock. We hope you'll come back. We'll see you next time.